a few more minutes. I was honored to meet Congressman Stupak a couple weeks ago, and he's kind enough to come and spend some time with us. Congressman spent 20 years representing Michigan in the House. He was on the Energy and Commerce Commission, but more importantly, he was very integrally involved with writing the House bill that we've been talking about, and was kind enough to be able to share some opinions. Right now he's a partner with Venable, and Congressman Bart Stupak, thank you.
Well, thanks, Craig. It's my pleasure to be here, and thanks for having us here. Venable has a long history with ACG, in that Chuck Morton, one of my partners in Washington, is actually your vice president right now, and on September 1st becomes the chair of the global board of ACG. So our law firm's been very much involved. Also, Ted Ramirez is with me. Ted is in our mergers and acquisitions, and when you're talking about healthcare and mergers and acquisitions, or any buying out a practice group or something, Ted's done them all, from California to Maryland to New York, and yes, they came in from Florida to be here on another issue. So our firm's been pretty much involved in healthcare as a general rule. And let me just say a few things about healthcare, and maybe we can get some questions. John Kelleher did a great job. I don't necessarily disagree with much that he said. In fact, I would agree with most things. I'm pleased to be out of Washington because I think he used the word chaos quite a bit. That's about what it is. After 25 years of intense politics, I decided not to run again, so I left in 2010. So I've been out now just about 2 years, and it's really nice to be able to be home on a weekend and actually pick up the Sunday paper and be able to read it, or actually to have your weekends at home. My congressional district in northern Michigan is one of the largest in the nation. It was like 600 miles from one end to the other. I had 3 of the 5 Great Lakes, so you could not get to point A to point B very easily. I lived in Menominee, Michigan, right on the Wisconsin border, still live there. Part of my district was Traverse City, 92 miles across Lake Michigan, 322 miles when I drove it. So my weekends I was never there. But I did have the honor of being on the Energy and Commerce Committee. I was chairman of the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee when the Democrats were in charge, and I spent quite a bit of my time investigating the insurance industry, how it affects healthcare, from rescissions to how small businesses are cost out for insurance. How do you justify some of the increases that were going on in the insurance industry, to the Medicare to Medicaid? And a little bit of the insider view. I played the critical role in getting the last few votes to put healthcare over the top. That meant a number of meetings within Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel. I won't go into those meetings with the mayor. They've remained private and unto ourselves, but no special deals were cut, I can assure you that. Because when I went to Congress in 1992, my goal was always to provide health care, quality, affordable health care for all Americans. And that was really the goal of the health care plan. And as you look at it, quality, affordable health care for all Americans, in the bill that was eventually passed, and I have to say bills because there never was truly one health care bill that passed at the end of Congress. There were actually 3 of them. To provide that quality, affordable health care, we should cover about 32 million. We're still short about 8 to 9 million, and how do we get there? It's still something that I'd be very interested in seeing how do we do it. But when you take a look at providing quality, affordable health care for all Americans, what are you really talking about? Expansion of the Medicaid program, of course. You're talking about subsidizing the low and middle income families and helping small businesses. Small businesses right now, as you know, can get about, I believe it's 35% this year of a credit if they purchase health care for their employees, for their employees. And by small businesses or small employers, for many of them, what we're seeing is they're saying, we want to provide that benefit. It's a critical benefit. Most of our hearings showed that most employees would rather have health care than a pay increase. Because if there's one thing they can't afford anymore, is the cost of health care. Neither could government, neither could businesses. So we had to do something. So when you take a look at the small businesses, if you will, many of them right now are just turning their coverage over to brokers in the idea of the exchange that came from the Senate in the House bill that we wrote in the Energy and Commerce Committee. We were a public option. We went to the Senate. The Senate said, no, we can't do that. That's too much of a government takeover. Looks too much like Canadian single-payer system. We want to build upon the private insurance. So they came up with the exchange idea. And that was the compromise at the end. We went with the exchange. But in the exchange, there's also a private exchange, which really comes online a little bit later. But many employers are saying, no, let's do it right now. What the exchanges offers you is a place where you can go to bid on your coverage to provide insurance for your employees. The private exchange is already up and running. It is already working. Chris Condalucci in our office actually is working with a group called Liaisons. Used to buy your insurance on the internet. Well, now they are actually getting into a private exchange. These employers are saying, this new health care bill, we don't understand it. We don't have time. We can't devote our attention to it. Our HR doesn't get it. Here, you, liaison, we're giving you so much money per employee. You provide the health insurance. You provide the whole thing, the administration, all the way through it. That is already happening. The purpose or the goal behind the health insurance program through the Institute of Medicine is to switch us from a transaction-based or quantity-based healthcare system into a quality-based, bundling of payments. So like right now, if I go in and have my knee operated on, which I've had many of, I go to the hospital, I see my orthopedic, I see a radiologist, I see an anesthesiologist, I get my outpatient, I get the lab. There's about 5, 6 different payments. Underneath the healthcare bill, after the IOM, the Institute of Medicine, gets done with their program, probably by 2015, probably 2017 at the latest, they'll pay Medicare, Medicaid, my insurance will pay one fee, probably to that hospital. The hospital will then hire the doctor, the anesthesia. They'll contract out those services. You're seeing the healthcare bill, what we're trying to do, provide quality, affordable healthcare for all Americans, being done right now while the Supreme Court makes its decision. We're squeezing out the inefficiencies in healthcare, the redundancy that's been in there, to try to bring out a more quality, affordable product. The private exchange is a good one. Example, if you take a look at what happened, many of provisions, as John said, of the healthcare bill has already started. If you take a look, I think it was last week, Kaiser Foundation, Family Foundation, came out along with the HHS and said, look, in the last year, because of the healthcare bill, you cannot have excessive overhead or profit limits. And they ordered, and shouldn't say ordered, they haven't implemented it yet, but $1.3 billion will be refunded back to individuals, small businesses, and large employers underneath the healthcare law. So many parts of the healthcare bill have already started that I think it's very difficult for the Supreme Court to just say, we're going to throw the whole thing out. John gave a great overview of the Supreme Court and those decisions. I believe, as most people, many legal scholars, and I don't hold myself out as a constitutional scholar at all, but in watching this whole process, the Commerce Clause, the individual mandate, the severability, the Anti-Injunction Act, I think Supreme Court's going to uphold the law. They've already decided that. I mean, a week after the arguments, they sit down on a Friday and they do the initial vote on how it's going to go, and then they determine who's going to be on the majority and who writes the opinion that's assigned by the Chief Justice. I also believe that they don't want a 5-4 vote, as you hear many people talk about. 5-4 makes it look like it's too political. I think the Roberts Court, under Justice Roberts, would rather see a 6-3 vote on the individual mandate. So everyone says the swing vote is Justice Kennedy. I can see a situation where Chief Justice Roberts says, I don't want to see a 5-4. I think at a minimum we need a 6-3 vote. I will join with you and we will write the majority opinion. Now, can they throw out the individual mandate and still leave the whole law? That's really an interesting question, because whenever Congress passes a law, we always put a provision in there that says no severability. In other words, severability clause. If one part, if the individual mandate, which is a tax, if the court rules that is unconstitutional, you strip that out of the bill, the legislation, rest of the legislation stands. It wasn't in the bill. It wasn't in the Senate version. Therefore, the argument is, if you strip out the individual mandate, since there is no severability clause, the whole law falls on constitutional grounds. I don't think the court will do that. I think the court will probably say, we don't like the individual mandate, Congress, go back, fix it, do something different than an individual mandate, do an expansion, but I think the court can very well say that, but let the law stand, because as I said, we're already well into it. It's already being implemented throughout the country to bring out, squeeze out these inefficiencies. So, if the Roberts Court did that, and the severability is one of the big arguments I hear all the time by the insiders in Washington and the constitutional arguments, remember what happened on the bill. Remember what happened when we did health care. And if we go back and we refresh our memories, the House, we passed our bill, public option, 220 votes we got, we needed 218, 220, boom, went over to the Senate. The Senate on Christmas Eve passed a bill. Remember, they had all the deals in it, the Cornhusker deal, the Sweetheart deal, Michigan had a pretty good deal. They cobbled together 60 votes. That bill was soundly rejected. And remember, Scott Brown was then elected. We lost, Ted Kennedy died, we lost a seat, we no longer had 60 votes. You need 60 votes to pass anything in the Senate. So here you have the House bill with the public option, here you have the Senate bill with the state exchanges, and we don't have 60, Democrats don't have 60 votes. How are we going to do it? You don't normally you'd go to a conference, work out the two differences, come up with a new bill. You couldn't do that because in the Senate, they couldn't get 60 votes. So you had the Senate bill over here, which had state options, state exchanges. You had the House over here, which had the public options and different pieces that everybody liked. So how do you merge them together? They used, and John had mentioned, the reconciliation process where you only need 51 votes. And then what the House did, we accepted the Senate bill, which did not have the severability clause. We accepted the Senate bill. Then we did reconciliation, and in there, we stripped out certain parts of funding and certain parts that could not, don't want to get too complicated, but would not survive underneath the Byrd rule in the Senate. And you only needed 51 votes. So we never had a true conference. So when you go back and take a look at it, severability clause was in the House bill, not the Senate bill. When you look at the legislative history, because the vehicle they used to finally pass the bill, actually 3 bills to get this health care bill, that one would stand. So I don't think the Supreme Court's going through it all that way. I think there's some feeling that the Supreme Court will do something with the individual mandate. As far as the Medicaid expansion, even the most, those who do not like health care believe the Medicaid expansion, that was the last argument on the third day of Supreme Court, that'll be upheld 7-2. The Medicaid expansion is one that everyone agrees the federal government and with the state government has its roles. When you talk about what's going on right now in health care, just take northern Michigan where I'm from. I told you the size of my district. It's very rural, very small. In Michigan, all of our hospitals except one are basically not-for-profit. We've used bonding and local taxes to build our hospitals. They're community hospitals, not-for-profit. We are now, our largest hospital, which is Marquette General Hospital, is now being purchased by, or proposed to be purchased. They've got an agreement. They're presenting it to the community. LifeBridge, Duke LifeBridge, out of North Carolina, Tennessee, North Carolina. They're coming there. Why would they come to northern Michigan to buy Marquette General Hospital? It'll be only the second for-profit hospital in Michigan if this goes through. And the arguments, or I shouldn't say arguments, the questions are being raised, why would you come to northern Michigan to buy our hospital? Why is the consolidation? Secondly, where does the money go? If you buy a hospital, which is really owned by the community, and the bondholders being the state of Michigan or the Marquette County, where does that money go? There's the sale price, if you will. How is that then administered? But the point that I want to leave you is there's an opportunity there, and you see it more and more. My own personal physician in Menominee, Michigan, never belonged to a group. There was a 3-person little practice. They're all individuals, had their own little individual practice. They've now been purchased by a larger practice. The consolidations are occurring to squeeze out the inefficiencies. And an example of the inefficiencies in our current system. In Marquette, Michigan, a hospital that's being sold, for every Medicare recipient per year, they receive about $6,200. $6,200. In Miami, Florida, for every Medicare recipient, they receive on an average per year $16,100. You cannot tell me the quality of health care in Miami, Florida is 2.5, almost 3 times better than the quality of care in Marquette, Michigan. In fact, I would argue just the opposite, because a smaller hospital, we know everybody there, and I think we provide a better overall care. Those are the inefficiencies in the systems. I know those are extremes. The lowest in the country is Hawaii at about $5,800 per Medicare recipient. So you go from $16,000 in Miami, $5,800 in Hawaii. Why isn't it the same? Those are the inefficiencies we try to address in the health care bill. And you see them more and more coming to fruition. So I think health care and the goal and the objective of the Congress after 100 years is try to provide, again, quality, affordable health care for all Americans. How do you do it? It is a complex piece of legislation. I agree. I'm going to be here all day, and I'll be happy to take any questions. We also, if I may, just one on the back table, I brought this document with me that we've used a number of times to help out employers and employees. It's on the back table there, and it's basically, it says what the rules you have to keep in mind as we go into the open enrollment season for 2013. Some of the provisions within the health care bill will affect you starting September of this year. So for your employees, you're all employers, you should take a look at it. It's on the back table. I left about 100 copies behind. Do we have a few minutes, John? Craig? Yeah, we'll take a couple. I'll take a few questions if you want. Keep in mind the efficiencies I talked about, not only just the Kaiser Foundation, going to give a rebate this year of $1.3 billion to payers underneath the health care bill because it went over the profit limit. HHS also said that the increase in patient care for this coming year, 2013, is 2.9%. For long-term care, the increase is 1.9%. And there's been a petition to increase health care premiums and policies in 6 states by 22% by 2 insurance companies. That was rejected. HHS and others have quite a bit of control underneath the health care bill to try to bring health care costs down. Like I said, you can't afford it, the government can't afford it, businesses can't afford it. We have to get the efficiencies and the inefficiencies out of health care, and they're going to do it by a number of ways, everything from HHS approval of price increases to what is the reimbursement rate. Once Medicare makes it reimbursement rate, most insurance companies follow suit as to those increases. So with that, let me open up for questions. Either I did a good job or else I totally confused you.
Well, thank you.
I guess we got one question back here. Unintended consequences? I'll get myself in trouble. And I will say that within 10 years, you'll be closer to the public option than the exchange. I think more and more employers are going to drop their insurance. More and more employees will come in underneath the Medicaid, if you will. Remember, underneath the exchange, there's 4 types of policies you can have. And I think you're going to see more people going to a basic one, and there's going to be probably a greater subsidy. So therefore, I think after 10 years, it's going to look more like the public option or almost like a single payer plan as opposed to what we have now. That's 10 years from now. So by, let's call it 20, let's call it by 2022, I think you're going to be almost there. I think you're going to see maybe 2 or 3 basic policies, and that'll be it. That'll be it. I think there will be less insurance options than we have now today. That's what I believe. Just the way it's going to go. If government's going to dictate how much the increases are going to be, doesn't leave the insurance industry a lot of places to go other than go along and maybe provide 3 different policies nationwide. But then how do you pay for it? Between 2000 and 2007, I got the statistics right here. Health insurance rose 78.2%. Health insurance premium rose 78.2% in that 8-year period between 2000 and 2007. Wages during that same period of time rose 4.6%. 78.2 versus 4.6. The economics just doesn't match up. And I don't see that getting a heck of a lot better, especially when you saw just last year with all the formulas we tried to put in here to try to keep the cost down. In 6 states, 2 insurance companies saw a 22% increase in the premium. What's the inflation rate in the country right now? 2%, 3% at best? How do you justify 22%? It's not new mandates under the law. So any of those new mandates pretty much were taken care of. So, well, another question. If not, I'll be here all day. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for what you